Hello and welcome to the third/fourth edition of the Smartest Dummies podcast. I'm Carson.
And I'm Elijah. And today we got quite a bit of stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about a book called Chaos. We're going to talk about space and how NASA's doing a mission to Mars.
In Mars 2020 is the mission.
In 2020.
It's a big collaborative effort.
And we're also going to talk about like nuclear thermal propulsion and stuff like that.
Aerospikes.
Different space stuff. And then we're also going to talk about trees.
And trees are trippy, trust me. We'll get to that. But back to why is this 3/4?
Yeah.
Really, it's 3/8.
Yeah, we've recorded this episode quite a few times because the first time that we recorded, we were ready to edit it and submit it, but it got deleted. So this is actually like the fourth recording of the third episode.
It was like 45 minutes worth and all deleted.
Yeah, that hurts. So we had to put a little time aside to get our stuff back together so we could have enough willpower to do it again.
Then the next time we did it, it felt really awkward talking about the same stuff again. So the episode just didn't.
Yeah, so sorry about the big gap between all the, it's like been a week and a half now since the last episode, but we're back and we're ready to rock and roll. So
yeah. Anyways, the book that we're reading, which we've said so many times, it feels so weird. We're reading Chaos. It's by James Gleick. It's about exactly what the title says, Chaos. And if you don't know what chaos is,
it has to do with science. Physics in particular.
Basically, has to do with something called entropy. Entropy is another word for disorder. It's like amount of disorder in a system.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know anything about thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics states that entropy increases with time, always. Well, from what we've observed, but I don't see. For the analogy that's popularly used is a glass on a table. It falls down and shatters on the ground. That's entropy increasing in a system, the system being a room. But if entropy decreased with time, it'd be like the glass being shattered and then coming back together to form a single solid piece on the table.
Yeah.
Which obviously doesn't happen.
Yeah, so that's why entropy always increases with time. So the whole purpose of studying chaos is to model particle interactions. And you can think of modeling particle interactions like as modeling weather or something related to fluid dynamics, or modeling how water is going to swirl in a tub when you stir it. And they're doing that with mathematics. So there's a big problem though. There are tons of particles within any given system of fluid dynamics. For example, in a cubic centimeter of water, that's going to be 13 moles of water, which is 8 times 10 to the 24th individual particles of water that all have their own specific movements and that all interact with each other.
Even the best of the best supercomputers can only predict their habits for a mere couple of seconds.
Yeah. And to give you a scaling idea, in a bottle of water, there are even more particles. It's going to be 1 octillion, or 1.08 times 10 to the 27th.
That's an example of in a basic 16.9 fluid ounces.
Yeah, just your basic water bottle you get from the store. That's a lot of particles. So when it comes to modeling weather or something of that scale, it gets really complicated. And Carson's going to tell you a bit about that.
Basically, so in the book that we're reading, Chaos by James Gleick, he gives an example in the early bits of the book where there's this man, what was his name?
Von Neumann, I think.
Von Neumann.
And we're not going to spell that for you because we don't know how to.
Basically, there's this guy, right?
He's modeling weather.
Yeah,
right?
he's trying to model weather in a predictable manner. And so he has this computer. He puts in 12 equations in this perfect world. Has no peaks or valleys or anything of the sort. It's perfect glassy Earth.
So ideally, he should be able to predict exactly what
because
goes on.
if he knows exactly what's going to happen because he has all the direct input values that he puts in, and there's 6 of those values. And at the end of each of its days, quote unquote, because it's like it's obviously a lot faster for just purposes of speed. I don't know. Anyways. So at the end of each of those, he has to it prints out 6 of those values so he can see them, and basically he knows in like an image form that he can visualize how his world is behaving, right. And how they're interacting.
Yeah, but one day, what did he do? He wanted to retry one of his scenarios.
Yeah, he wanted to recreate one of the specific scenarios in some sort of, I think it was like some sort of storm or something like that. I'm not sure. Yeah. Besides the point, but he got lazy. And he cut off one of the input values.
And he only did. And he did less stuff. Yeah, he rounded off.
He rounded off, right? And then in just a mere 2 to 4 days, like his ability to predict the future outcomes completely went out the roof with all the same equations, with all the same other inputs. He was no longer able to predict the same scenarios, and when he redid it and he compared the two, they were nothing alike.
So this phenomena of like dependence on initial conditions was really widespread throughout different experiments in chaos. So they started calling it the butterfly effect. It's basically a dead end, you could say, for chaos science. But until they figure out better ways to model particle interactions, then we're kind of just stuck. Which is, the book goes on to talk about fractals and different patterns. And we're still learning ourselves, so we're not really going to talk about that today. But we do recommend the book. You all should go check it out. It's Chaos by James Gleick. It's a really good book. So anyway.
It's on Audible.
Yeah, it's on Audible.
Well, it's on YouTube, so we can actually leave a link in the description.
Yeah, and y'all can get the book for free. All you got to do is create an account. You don't have to pay monthly fees or anything. It's just free. So
yeah,
at least for the first book. We're working.
Okay. Anyways, to space, Mars 2020. This is going to happen. This is also the year where, for those who are interested in like space and like NASA and that kind of things, you would know that like 15 years ago, something like that, the shuttle that like was reusable or whatever, reusable quote unquote. They kind of had to replace every part, and it cost $1 billion to maintain. Not exaggerating, but that shuttle was shut down. We've been using Russian rockets to get all of our astronauts to and from space to the International Space Station for the last like over dozen years.
Yeah, but now space is privatized, or at least space travel.
Private organizations like SpaceX and Blue Origin and things of the sort.
Mm-hmm. And
basically, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, the two richest men alive.
And apparently, this Mars 2020 mission is not just going to be NASA. It's going to be a collaboration between all of these different space companies.
And
so
this is it's going to be a big year this year for space exploration. We're going to Mars. I think there is going to be another mission to the moon, actually. Not manned, but I think there is going to be another mission to the moon.
Eventually, hopefully we'll have a colony on the moon. I don't know.
Actually,
I don't know how soon that's going to be.
A really cool thing with colonies on different planets, like anyone who's a fanboy or whatever, Elon Musk knows, his plan is to die on Mars. He wants to be the first person to live. Well, obviously, he said he's not going in the first colony. He said
probably not. Yeah.
Other people can do that. But basically, the issue with colonies on other planets, but also like the prospect of it, is like, first of all, gravity. We know how it affects our astronauts that are in super low Earth orbit. They're literally right on the edge of that of the physical atmosphere.
Realm of the gravitational
field. They're still even within the gigantic thing of the electromagnetic sphere, so they're getting a lot of protection. However, there's this thing called cosmic radiation. I don't know. Basically, in the beginning, the Big Bang, that constant radiation, it's evenly spread out through the entirety of the universe. Well, not perfectly evenly. There's obviously different places with more radiation than others, but there's this background noise, you could say. And we have, like regenerative things for microgravity and small bits of gravity, like, exercise machines, where we can prevent bone and muscle deterioration, so if you do want to come back to Earth. However, when you live on a planet, like, for example, Mars, just for the planets to realign in the way they need to for them to get back to Earth, they would have to be there for a minimum of almost 2 years.
That's a long time to be in less than 1 Earth gravity.
38% gravity, to be specific. But one of the prospects of this is, first of all, radiation technology needs to skyrocket. Because also, whenever you're outside the Earth's electromagnetic sphere, which is basically preventing these super high energy photons and electrons or whatever smashing into you and stuff, breaking you up. So basically, there's like a solar flare from the sun that comes blasting through the space as we're going on the 6-month journey to Mars. They would have about an hour before it hits them. Well, roughly, depending on where they are, it could be in 45 minutes to an hour. But
they're going to have a bunch of like lead on the outside of the ship or something. Well, something to protect them from all that.
And we have ways of preventing this.
Maybe they can make a giant magnet within the ship. Like, the reason Earth can reflect all that is because it's a big magnet, so...
Yeah, its center is solid as... Well, technically the mantle actually is solid. Fun fact, a lot of people like to visualize the mantle as...
liquid.
as like a liquid movement. And, like there is convections and things in the mantle. However, people like, I think of it a lot more liquidy than it actually is. Like for example, all those convections are happening in the millions and millions and millions of years. Like 100 million years, they'll move a little bit. Like it's a solid. And the center though is mostly like iron and nickel and stuff like that, and that just sort of like creates this giant electromagnetic field around the Earth, which is a good way to think about it is like if an electron smashes against the Earth, like in the North and South Poles, we have what's called the auroras, which is basically electron ionizing the atmosphere.
Yeah, and the reason the auroras are at the north and south is because, or is it just the north? I don't know. Well, the reason they're up there is because the magnetic field is pointed towards the sun, and you can think of it as orienting from the equator.
Yeah.
So it's stronger at the center, and then as you go up to the north, the magnetic field is going to get weaker and weaker. Mm-hmm. So those electrons are actually able to skid off the top of the Earth's atmosphere.
There is like some ideas like what they'll have is if there is like because the constant radiation there is going to have to be shielding on the sides of the ship, and a good idea so far because obviously they have their heat shielding from re-entry and entry. They have shielding just from things hitting it. Like for example, in right above our orbit, the main issue with the International Space Station is human-made objects, like the metal from previous missions. There's a lot of it, but there's also what's called micrometeors. Micrometeors are everywhere. They're really rare, relative.
Yeah.
And then, so like if you're flying through space and one of these are going 10 times the speed of a bullet, and they're like a 5-pound ball of super not dense at all rock.
It's gonna smash right through a rocket. Nothing's gonna
it'll go straight through it. So what they do is they have this really thin sheet of metal, and it acts similarly to like if you have a giant net and someone falls in it, it'll like distribute the thing across the whole surface.
Yeah.
And what it also does is it
like a pillow.
It powderizes it, so the rocks do go straight through, but then it hits the shielding and all these little dust particles, so it doesn't really do anything.
That's really cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and then another issue is with the constant radiation is an idea to store water, and they store their water in the walls. And basically, they would have a certain room to where if they knew a solar flare was coming. First of all, a lot of their lifelines, like where they recycle their pee, like it's kind of gross to say, but it is how they get their water, and also their food. That's another big thing. They can't they can't bring it all with them because it's just too much weight. You wouldn't be able to. So they're gonna have to make their own food up there, which is a whole nother subject, which is trippy. They're thinking about doing what's called like water growth, which is basically instead of having a pot, it's just in this like water with a bunch of nutrients in it. Besides the point, basically they're gonna have this room to where every person on the ship will go in, and then it's gonna break a bunch of technology, but it won't kill them because if they were outside, their whole bodies would instantly just
poof. Yeah, or they just get really bad cancer.
Yeah, and even right now, just going to the International Space Station, you're increased 3 to 5% to have cancer in your lifetime overall, just from being there. And they're inside the electromagnetic field.
Yeah, space is a pretty hostile place if you haven't gotten that.
There's a company, I think they're out of China or Russia, can't remember. They're developing this like armor. It's like this really thin plastic-like substance, and then the astronauts will wear it. Like for example, we already have like a really special armor that they use on spacewalks and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the temperature difference alone can be up to 600 degrees, like negative and positive from when the sun is out and when it's not. And if you don't know, the International Space Station goes around the Earth every 90 minutes, like from like a full sunset to a full like sunrise. And the pressure, and actually, this is a really cool thing to mention. There's this really cool astronaut. I can't remember his name, which I hate.
Neil Armstrong?
No, he was on the International Space Station. Basically, there was this port right for this antenna, and they were replacing it, and because the antenna got shut down, and it came loose, so they had to put the ports together, right? And the female part of it, like the part where the other port goes inside, was a bit too small for the other one. So what he did was, right before because it had a really small time frame, because this was also its power source. And if you don't know, in space, it's really, really cold. And with the cold on it, it'll make all the technology inside of it not work. So it has a heating unit which keeps it warm. So they had a very limited amount of time before they needed to fix it. So what he did was when the sun came out, because it comes out every 45 minutes, or sets and sunrise, and when the sun rise, he held the male side behind his back so the sun couldn't hit it, so it stayed cold, and the other one he held out. And so thermal expansion, and then they went through, and they were bonded together, and
that's awesome.
It was this really
That's
cool
why they
thing.
only choose smart people for astronauts.
Yeah,
you know?
and it cost like that specific antenna was worth like $50 million, and he just saved them that, which is a big thing for space travel, and he just saved the day there. But with the Mars though, it's really cool. They have a lot of cool.
You want to talk
events.
about the Mars helicopter next?
Oh yeah, dude, this is
something
cool.
I don't know when they're gonna launch it, but the fact that they have it is just cool.
This year.
Oh, they are? Okay, cool.
Yeah, March 2020.
Yeah, this helicopter.
It's a new rover.
The blades spin at 70% the speed of sound because it has to go the equivalent of 100,000 kilometers? It has to fly at a height.
100,000
kilometers. 100,000 feet. Sorry.
Okay, basically.
Yeah, kilometers would be way. But yeah,
in the air.
The record for a regular helicopter on Earth is 40,000 feet. So yeah, it's a huge engineering feat.
And basically, this is less of like a productive instrument. Like its very first like mission or whatever, when it boots up after 2 hours of landing on the rover, is to take a selfie of the rover. That's what they're calling
and it can only fly for 90 seconds at a time. But the fact that they can fly on Mars is just
and it
awesome.
takes a full day to recharge.
Oh really? That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, it goes so fast that you can hear the spinning on Mars. And you can't usually hear anything in space, but on Mars the atmosphere is still there. So
yeah, it only has 1% of the Earth's atmosphere, which is a really cool thing. So, and another cool thing with the helicopter is it's going to be stored on the belly of the rover. So if you don't know about the new rover coming out, it has a lot of cool functions that the other ones didn't, because they discovered that on the soil itself, there's not any life. They thought that there was when they threw some radioactive carbon, and it was like re-burping out like bacteria would. But then they found out with higher doses that there wasn't anything there, and there's a lot of different things. I think chlorine might have been in the ground or something and pushed it out or something. They don't know. But basically there's not life. So they think if they drill down a little bit, they might be able to find some. So it has a lot of cool things to do with that. But the helicopter is going to be on the underbelly, right? So as it lands, it uses a series of explosives to shoot itself away from it. And it's going to be 100 meters away. It takes 2 hours to boot up. Then after, it's going to fly in there and take a selfie. It's just a proof of concept, basically, for future people.
And the thing is, it can only weigh 4 pounds. It's a really small helicopter.
Yeah, it's insane.
Picture a drone, except it only has one propeller, or 2 propellers, but in one spot. It's not a quadcopter. It's just a basic helicopter. It doesn't even have a rotary, like, for steering. Is that what you call it, a rotary?
No, they didn't have...
an extra propeller for steering is what I meant to say.
Yeah, it doesn't have that. Basically, it has 2 blades, and the top one pulls air in, and the one underneath it directs the air. Basically, since there's so little air, the top one's pulling air in, and the one right below it is actually pushing it down to create most of the thrust.
Yeah.
It's kind of like turning the air from turbulent, pushing it in to make it a bit more smooth and more laminar to perfectly push it down for greater efficiencies with its thrust.
And you might be thinking, well, how do they test all this on Earth? And that's actually another really cool aspect of this project, because they had this huge vacuum where they can create any atmospheric pressure they want. And so they went to 1/100th, which is the Mars atmospheric pressure. But another problem was gravity. So what they did to simulate the 38% G that occurs on Mars is they attached a fishing string to the top of the drone, and then they pulled it up on a pulley as it was flying at just the right rate so that it experienced 38% G, which is pretty awesome. That's like really cool. So yeah, that's how they
were able to it goes from,
test it.
Yeah, it's already such a small weight at just 4.4 pounds. However, 38% of that is only 1.672 pounds. So on Mars, it's only like 1.5 pounds. Really?
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's really insane how they
the blades. How long are the blades? I don't know how long they are. They looked about a yard long a piece, and they only weigh 35 grams
each. It's really insane. It's a foam core with a carbon fiber outing, and the thing has a camera on it too, which is another really cool thing. A super high quality camera, and it's so light and compact. But majority of the power for the rocket and majority of the weight from the batteries is actually used to keep it warm because on Mars, as you may know, it's very cold. It's further from the sun.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have an atmosphere to insulate it, so it's a super cool planet.
And like Carson was saying, it's really compact. The package on the bottom is like maybe a foot across. It's like this cube, like
maybe even
that
less
has
than
dimensions
a foot.
of like a foot or less. And then it's got these 4 what do we call them? Landing gear?
Yeah, these little legs. They look like
tripod. Not a tripod.
It's
a
similar
quad
to if you know what a mosquito eater is. Those little like bugs that like land. It's
basically
it looks
landing
like
gear.
that. Yeah. And they're kind of flexible. It's similar to a tripod, but it's like a quad pod.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, that thing is so awesome. But yeah, what else do you want to talk about?
The drill.
Mars drills.
It's not like a normal drill. What it does is, it's first of all, the drill has to be able to run in a vacuum, which is already an issue, because you can't have any like lubricant or anything like that, because it would also freeze. So it's like there's so many issues. So what they do is there's a specific company that's making the drill. Their mission is like they want to make space, like where they can start manufacturing things and doing things like that. So space can eventually turn into a lot more of an economical thing for the everyday person to go to, which is the overall goal, colonizing other planets and such. And what they're doing is they're drilling into the ground, right? And then they lift the whole drill upside down because it has a little inner thing that the dirt will go into, and they lift it up in the air and it vibrates. It just shakes. And it has a little hole that all the dirt goes through, and it goes into a little vial. And in this little vial, it'll fill up 37 of them in different locations, obviously. And then, hopefully, this is another issue. Another issue with how are they going to get these vials back to Earth for examination?
So we also wanted to talk about nuclear thermal propulsion, which is a type of propulsion that they would use in future rocket engines. And to give you a little background, when we say nuclear thermal propulsion, you can think of like a nuclear power plant, because basically it's a small nuclear power plant within a rocket, you could kind of say. So what a nuclear power plant does is it uses the massive amounts of energy created from a nuclear reaction to heat up steam, which then powers huge turbines that create electricity. And those nuclear reactions, they give off huge amounts of energy. I don't have an exact number, but if we were able to create a reactor small enough to fit inside of a rocket, then we would be able to heat hydrogen to propel that rocket a lot cheaper than any other chemical fuel would be able to.
Yeah, basically.
Actually, it would be 2 times better than current rocket propulsion.
Yeah, because they don't need the oxidizer, which is the biggest factor. Because obviously, if you know, there's no oxygen in space, right? So nothing can burn. So when you're burning, like for methane, for example, when they're going to Mars, they're using methane because they can remake methane on Mars. And they burn methane and liquid oxygen at the same time, which is half the weight, right? But with this, it's 2 times as efficient, and not only because I think it's even more efficient because they have less weight from the oxidizer because they don't need it. They can double up on liquid hydrogen. And since hydrogen is the lightest element, it has the greatest exhaust thrust. For example, like the greatest way to think about it is when you have like hydrogen coming out the bag, it's rapidly expanding, right? There's not any flame. Obviously, it will be lit just because you don't want a bunch of hydrogen chilling right there because it will cause massive explosion.
You want to light it off a little bit at a time instead of all at once.
But when it's in space, it won't be lit off. It's just going to be expanding gas. And so basically what's going to happen is since the hydrogen is coming out, it's going from this extremely high pressure, right? And it has it's surrounding by this little radioactive substance in the middle, in this like little tubular thing, right? The liquid hydrogen is going over it. It's insanely red glowing hot.
Yeah.
It goes around it, it heats up and goes from a liquid all the way to a gas.
It like instantly and
it expands super quickly and shoots out the back and causes thrust. The difference between that and let's say methane with an oxidizer is the flame coming out is also shooting out heavy metals, or like, you know, quote unquote heavy metals, just heavy substances that it has to carry along with it that uses some of the force. And this can more efficiently spread out the force over that small area. So basically, it's just more thrust.
Yeah, and development for these engines started around, I want to say, the 1950s. You're gonna have to fact check me on that. But the thing is, chemical engines beat them to it, and they got all the funding. And so, actually, NASA is making kind of a comeback with their nuclear thermal propulsion. But right now, it's
This
still
year
in the
as well.
development. Yeah, but it's just, funding is the biggest problem because they have all of the chemical engines all at their laboratories. They have all the scientists they need.
They have
all of the
it's like more
testing
data
facilities.
behind it. They can more
Yeah.
accurately predict how it's going to behave, which is the biggest factor with this. Is
They're starting from the ground up with
Yeah.
nuclear thermal propulsion.
well, we have some foundation. That's why NASA's doing more with it. But however, it's really difficult to reignite some. That's a fun analogy.
Reignite a project that's already been dead for 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, another cool thing we want to talk about is aerospike engines. You could call it an engine, but it could be chemical. It could be a thermal engine. It doesn't really matter. All this has to do with is directing thrust.
Yeah, that's
in the most
all
efficient way
aerospace.
possible.
And as you may know, as you go up in the atmosphere, the pressure changes because we have the entirety of the weight of the atmosphere on top of this at
Which
sea
is
level.
1 atm at sea level.
And then whenever you go to the top, it gets closer and closer to a perfect vacuum. Well, perfect. And then the issue is whenever you have a set hole, for example,
Aperture.
as the bell.
He's talking about the rocket
Yeah,
propulsion.
the gas is gonna want to
director.
expand in different ways as you go up.
Because
So-
of atmospheric pressure.
Yeah, basically.
If you can get it to expand, if you can get it to shoot out in as straight a line as possible.
Yeah, you want it as straight as possible to direct the thrust exactly where you want it. And because every action has equal and opposite reaction. So
Right.
that's the more perfect your line's going to be in the straight direction that you're trying to go.
And with the rocket bell, you can think of it as the gas is going to be pointing straight down when you first take off, say in a shuttle, and then once you get to the really low atmospheric pressures up near the top of the atmosphere,
It's gonna
expand out to the left and right of the bell, and so that the thrust isn't going to be as
Nearly as
accurate
efficient.
or as efficient.
But
these aerospikes are going to change the size of the aperture as they go up,
so
depending on the
basically,
atmospheric pressure.
why it's called aerospike is you have there's two different types. There's a linear, which is like a straight line, and also where you get the name of spike. And basically, it's like having a cone, right? And instead of the fuel coming out of the hole in the center, the fuel is coming out of the sides and reaching the middle. And as the atmosphere changes, the pressure can pull it out all at once. It's still going to remain in that straight line because it's adjusting with it. And another I guess you could say issue with this is the thrust can't come out as efficiently at that maximum efficiency point that they plan for with the bell. So with the bell, they have two stages, right?
You get really good thrust at the very
you get
bottom.
really good thrust. Well, you can adjust at the bottom, the middle, or top, and then you have to separate and go into outer space.
And use your smaller thrusters for that. So you have to send out your you basically trash all the other thrusters.
Yeah, the boosters. And with SpaceX and them, they're reusing them, which is a good thing.
But
With the development of aerospike and basically the straight ones, it's just exactly what it sounds like. It's a straight line and it's shooting out the side. Basically going around.
you would only need one booster.
You would only need one engine
for the entire trip.
for the entirety of the trip. Exactly. And this is where reusability will come in the future. A combination of these two things as well, which
The nuclear thermal propulsion and the aerospike, if you combine those, we're pretty lit.
Literally, the combination of those two is going to be probably the biggest changing point until my engine.
Yeah, the one he still hasn't got a patent for.
For
space travel.
For more economically friendly reusability in space travel.
So yeah, that's basically our rundown of space right now. So let's talk about trees.
Something more down to earth. Literally.
This is a Veritasium video that we're just basically copying, but we thought it was really cool, so we're gonna share it. So his whole point of the video was to ask the question: how can trees be so tall? Because if you think about it, they have to send water to the very top of that tree. And actually, in a previous video, Veritasium demonstrated that water can only be sucked up a straw for 10 meters. And there are some trees that reach up to 100 meters, like the redwoods in California.
Because the issue is, when you have like a really long straw, for example, and as the water goes up, you can have a perfect vacuum above that 10 meters. And that's the maximum suction for a gaseous thing.
And then any other energy input of that system is going to cause the water to boil instead of taking the atmospheric pressure out.
So it won't get any taller.
Yeah, it'll just boil. And then,
although there's some trees that are over 100 meters tall.
So there's a huge problem with biological theory. I don't know. Is that what you call it? Anyway, so basically what trees can do is, I guess what liquids can do is they can go into negative atmospheric ranges or negative pressure ranges, which, what is it, gas? Yeah, gas can't do that because gas can only go down to zero.
It's a different type of vacuum because it's more of, it's the force of a negative vacuum.
Basically, you can spread out the liquid a lot more than you can gas.
Yeah, and
while still keeping it liquid.
with it. Because with a perfect vacuum, there's no particles there, right? However, with a liquid, there's particles there, just they're pulling on each other with the force that a vacuum can, but then even more, because in a perfect system, there's no other disturbing things. Like, for example...
To cause it to turn into a gas.
And this is what the discovery was. The xylems that bring the water to the top of the tree, there's never any oxygen or any other air bubbles, anything in there. It's just the water. So the water is able to pull itself all the way to the very top without boiling at any given point because there's no disturbing force. Like, there's no extra force to add energy to the system.
So basically, it's a perfect vacuum.
Less than a perfect.
Less than a...
It gets up to negative 15 atmospheric pressure.
Infinitely perfect vacuum.
And obviously, as you go down and all the way to the roots, you approach 1 atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then you may ask the question...
How
are they creating this suction?
Yeah, how can they create the suction without ripping themselves apart? And it's because of the tensile strength of water. Because the tubes are so small that the water is able to distribute that force along the tube.
And
because the tensile strength of water.
The cells that they go through, where to evaporate or whatever, like to go to the next level, not evaporate, like trans through or whatever, go through, like soak through, I guess you could say. The cells around them are at 1 atmospheric pressure. However, on the inside, where the water is, the tensile strength of water is stronger than that small force. Because it's such a small... It's only 2 nanometers, which is like nothing.
Mathematics. If you're into physics, take Physics 2 and you'll learn about pressure and water and all that.
There's another part that provides suction as well called transpiration, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, I think that's what he said.
Well, basically, on the leaves, right, water will evaporate from it, during photosynthesis type stuff. And the water will go be pulled up from the one behind it, kind of in like a replacement type thing. So, like, imagine if you got like a tube with a spring at the bottom and a platform, and if it's full of balls, and at the top there's a little like pincher that's holding that ball in place. If you pull one out, the spring's going to expand even more and push the next ball up, kind of like in a clip.
Like, you mean like a gun clip?
Yeah.
Or we're calling it an airsoft clip.
An airsoft clip. Yeah. But instead of there being a spring, there's just a bunch of water behind it with a lot of pressure.
So it's creating suction.
Yeah.
Oh, another cool fact about trees is that I think it was 90 to 99% of the water that
it's
they
95.
take... 95% of the water they take from the ground is just evaporated. It's basically useless. Because I guess you could say for every... How much carbon dioxide? For every molecule of carbon dioxide, they release hundreds of molecules of water.
Yeah.
So, which is kind of interesting. I don't even know why that's a fact, but it is.
Another really fascinating thing to take into consideration as well, another potassium video. Trees do not get their mass from the water. They don't get their mass from the nutrients in the soil or anything like that. They get their mass from the carbon in the air. Trees are over 90% just carbon.
You could think of it as a carbon icicle.
Yeah, because me and him were talking about.
It's freezing carbon, you could say. It's taken from the gas state and putting it in the solid state, which is pretty awesome.
It's a good way to think about it, and it's really cool. And that's why whenever you burn a tree, carbon emissions, you're just changing that from state to state. Icicle. You're melting an icicle.
Of course, they're chemically different, the carbon in the air and the carbon in the tree, but it's still kind of a cool way to think about it.
Yeah, it makes you look at, when you look around at trees and stuff, it makes you look at them a lot more
With more respect.
Like,
Thank you for
they're
what
pretty
you do,
cool.
for your service.
And also, some trees
Mr. Tree.
can live to be hundreds of years old. Another fun fact. And like, if you cut a tree down, if you look inside, for every ring that you see, the tree is a year old. It's really interesting.
So yeah, that's our little segment on trees.
Go donate.
I don't think we have much more to talk about. Yeah, go donate to Team Trees. Have we hit 20 million yet?
Oh,
I think
actually,
we have.
they already got 20 million.
Yeah, it was a while ago that they hit it.
I don't know if it's shut down though. They might. I don't know.
They might still be
Be
going.
able to plant a tree. If not, feel free to donate to either one of us.
Yeah, we'll donate directly to Team Trees for you.
Or
Don't worry about
you'll
it.
donate to the Make Us Money and Business Savvy project.
We're still working on how many patents we got now. We got your rocket patent. We have a patent for the cash grab door closer thing.
Yeah.
And we have a patent for the other
Mystery
unspecified
plasticless.
projects. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, we're busy.
Yeah,
Except
and
we haven't done anything yet.
yeah,
So.
I'm about to get a new computer, and then I'm gonna be learning CAD.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna design it, and we're gonna send it off to get 3D printed because neither one of us have a 3D printer.
Nope.
Although I think I was gonna mention, which we could talk about this here. There's like these workstations, right? And like you can go to them. It's like a place where you pay to get in, and you can use their tools and such, like 3D printers
Cool.
and things like that, and laser cutters.
That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah,
So it's
so
basically
We can go to one of those.
It's like a gym, but it's a shop.
Yeah, we go to one of those, and we're gonna 3D print some parts, and then what we'll do after that is we'll contact manufacturers from China.
Yeah.
And we'll send them our CAD models and ask them, how much can you make this for us for this price at this rate?
And if it's crappy, then we'll just sell the patent.
With this materials. And what we're going to do, and we'll probably won't even get a patent for the door close. It's just a cash
Yeah.
Basically, we even talked about this already. Our market, like our target market is like between the ages of like 10 and 18 years old. Like it's a really small age group.
In economic theory, your age gap should be like 15 years or more.
Yeah, like you want a lot of people to be able to use your product.
Yeah.
This is just like a simple thing. We're gonna
By definition,
put
it is a
bunch
cash
of
grab.
ads up, right? We're gonna put a bunch of
all over Snapchat, maybe Facebook.
Instagram, Facebook, all everywhere. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna market the crap out of it, make a simple Shopify website, and we're just gonna have to get a bunch of stock. We'll have to invest. You know, it's gonna cost money. We'll have to invest. We're gonna get our manufactured product, and we'll sell it, and then we'll order more, and then
So on.
pretty simple.
And then we'll use all that cash to work on other projects.
We'll use all that cash to fund
the actual patent.
mysterious
Yeah.
patents
Patents are expensive.
Patents are very expensive. And then once we get that, we'll make bigger projects. And then I'll use some of my shares, because we're going 50-50. I'll use some of my shares, because we're going to work on our new products for plasticless. I'll use some of my shares to fund my patent. He'll use some of his to do his own stuff. And at the same time, we'll be talking about it on the podcast.
Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We talked about a lot today.
It's fun to take y'all on the ride of what all we're doing.
Yeah.
Our research as we learn stuff. And
Yeah.
it's really fun to be able to come and talk about cool stuff we learn throughout.
Yeah, we're going to
the
talk about it
week.
anyway, so we might as well talk about it with y'all.
Yeah, that's actually how this podcast got started. We were working
at Subway.
At Subway,
Yeah.
undisclosed sandwich shop. And we were like, I was like, bro, like we're always talking about awesome science stuff.
Might not make money, or at least have a little fun.
Yeah, have a little fun with it. So we bought a microphone off Amazon, and here we are.
$30. Yeah, so anyway, give us some feedback. We have our social media links in the description. And just let us know what you think.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram and things like that. We're the Smartest Dummies podcast. Almost everywhere we're the Smartest Dummies. I'm at Carson Lawson, basically everywhere. And then yours is like...
Something Eli.
Yeah, we'll
have
have
to
a
change
link
it.
in the description, but... Follow us, give us some feedback, let us know how we're doing, any other things that you want us to talk about, cool stuff we should research.
Yeah, anyway, thanks guys, see you later.